Welcome to this explainer. Picture this, it's the 13th century, and the Mongol war machine is just completely sweeping across the globe, literally redrawing the map of the world at terrifying speeds. Today, we're diving into the story of the man who carried the full, crushing weight of that empire straight into the Middle East. We're talking about a commander who didn't just conquer territories, he absolutely shattered ancient dynasties. Let's get right into the devastating campaigns and the incredibly complex legacy of Hulagu Khan.
Now, Hulagu Khan is a wildly polarizing figure. His campaigns essentially brought the Islamic Golden Age to a sudden and frankly devastating end. You might have heard the phrase, turning the Tigris River black. Well, that's not just some dramatic metaphor. It's the chilling historical reality of his most infamous conquest. He brought immense tragedy to the streets of Baghdad and permanently flipped the geopolitical balance of power. But to understand exactly how he pulled this off, we really need to look at where he came from.
Born around 1217, Hulagu was Mongolian royalty through and through. I mean, he was the grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan. His mother, Sorag Haktami Beki, was a fiercely influential princess, known for raising literal titans. His brother was none other than Kublai Khan. So, when another brother of his, Möngke Khan, took the throne in 1251, he handed Hulagu a monumental task, the absolute conquest of Southwest Asia. No small feat, right? By 1253, Hulagu was marching out of Mongolia with a truly massive army at his back.
But look, you don't get to command a Mongol army just by birthright alone. Following strict tradition, Hulagu was trained from childhood to be a highly efficient, absolutely deadly warrior. Before most people even learn a basic trade, he had already mastered horse riding, archery, and incredibly complex warfare tactics. The big takeaway here, Hulagu wasn't just some royal directing troops from a comfortable tent miles away. He was a sharpened weapon himself, deeply ingrained in that brutal cavalry culture that made the Mongol war machine virtually unstoppable.
So, what was his first major target on this campaign? It was actually the stuff of legends, the infamous Ismaili assassins, also known as the Hashishin. This was a mysterious, deeply feared sect operating out of isolated mountain fortresses. They were famous across the entire region for using political assassinations to punch way above their weight class. They kept much larger empires completely paranoid and at bay. They were, essentially, the ultimate asymmetrical threat of the 13th century.
However, the Mongols definitely did not play by the region's usual rules. In 1256, Hulagu set his sights on the assassins' supposedly impenetrable fortress of Alamut, and he didn't just defeat them, he completely captured the stronghold and nearly wiped out the entire order. By crushing a sect that had terrified local rulers for generations, Hulagu sent a chilling, unmistakable message to the rest of the Middle East. No fortress is safe, and absolutely no one hides from the Mongol advance.
This ruthless momentum built directly up to the ultimate climax of his campaign, the siege of Baghdad, the absolute crown jewel of the Abbasid Caliphate. When Hulagu arrived at its gates in early 1258, Caliph al-Mustasim made a tragic miscalculation. Severely underestimating the threat, he delayed seeking outside help, basically believing his legendary city was untouchable. Well, he was wrong. The siege kicked off on January 29th. The Mongols brought massive numbers and devastating siege engines. And a mere 12 days later, on February 10th, the great city surrendered.
What followed that surrender was just a week of absolute nightmare. Historians estimate the death toll during those 7 days was staggering. We're talking anywhere between 200,000 and over 1 million people. Just try to wrap your head around that number, especially in the context of the 13th century world population. Hulagu didn't just want to capture the capital, he ordered a calculated, brutal massacre specifically designed to totally extinguish the city's spirit and prevent any future resistance.
The sheer scale of the cultural loss here is almost impossible to overstate. In fact, this event is widely considered the symbolic end of the Islamic Golden Age. Homes, ancient mosques, and irreplaceable libraries were burned to the ground. The famed House of Wisdom, which was basically the global epicenter of science and learning at the time, was utterly destroyed. Historical accounts tell us that so many thousands of priceless manuscripts were thrown into the water that the Tigris River literally ran black with bleeding ink. Centuries of human knowledge just washed away in days.
Then came the fate of the Caliph himself, and his bizarre demise was actually dictated by a strict Mongol superstition. See, they believed that royal blood must never ever touch the ground, lest it anger the heavens. So, in a pretty grim display of malicious compliance with their own rules, Hulagu had the caliph tightly wrapped up in a heavy carpet. He then had his heavy cavalry literally trample him to death. The empire was decapitated in the most brutal and technically bloodless sense you could imagine.
Following the total devastation of Baghdad, the Mongol war machine really did seem completely invincible. By 1260, they had pushed even further west into Syria, successfully capturing both Aleppo and Damascus. It felt like nothing in the world could stop them. But As we know, history loves a turning point. That very same year, a portion of Hulagu's army clashed with the formidable Mamluks at the Battle of Ain Jalut, and they suffered their first major historical defeat. It was a massive shock to the world order that finally shattered that myth of Mongol invincibility.
Now, Hulagu actually had to retreat to Iran upon getting news that his brother, the Great Khan, had died, so he wasn't personally present for that historic defeat. But this retreat marked a really fascinating pivot for him. Hulagu shifted from being a relentless conqueror to becoming the founder of his own empire, the Ilkhanate. Establishing his capital in the Azerbaijan region of Iran, he essentially stopped destroying infrastructure and started building it. He strengthened administration, structured taxation, and boosted regional trade, laying the foundation for generations of Mongol rule.
And this brings us to the fascinating paradox of his life. Hulagu leaves behind a deeply, deeply dual legacy. On one hand, he's the man responsible for unprecedented destruction, a name that still evokes sheer terror across the Middle East. But on the other hand, he became a remarkably tolerant ruler. Influenced heavily by his Nestorian Christian wife, Dokos Khatun, he showed immense tolerance toward Christians and other groups, while personally leaning toward Buddhism himself. He destroyed the House of Wisdom, yet ironically became a massive patron of scholars, funding brilliant minds like the astronomer Nasir el-Din el-Tusi. It's wild, right?
This incredibly complex life came to a surprisingly quiet end on February 8, 1265. Hulagu Khan passed away and was buried near Lake Urmia. He successfully passed the throne to his son Abaka Khan. And by doing so, he achieved what so many great conquerors just utterly fail to do. He secured a stable succession. He ensured that the geopolitical shockwaves he sent through Iran and the Middle East would remain institutionalized for decades to come.
As we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with a final provocative question to think about regarding the true weight of Hulagu Khan's historical footprint. His story is undeniably a masterclass in the terrifying danger of absolute power. But looking at the ashes of Baghdad and the blackened waters of the Tigris, we really have to ask, was this single event the biggest turning point in Islamic history? Take a moment to consider how vastly different our modern world might look today if Hulagu Khan had never ridden out from Mongolia. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep exploring the fascinating twists of our shared history.